Good afternoon, team. It's Coach Ryan, leading you through today's part 3 of the Basic of Exercise workshop. Today, we're going to focus on flexibility. If you're looking at this later in the day or on YouTube, I'll probably get started at around the 2-minute mark. It's about 4:58 right now. I'm doing this live at 5. Just giving some people some time to kind of check in, let the live video appear on people's feeds. But we will start in a couple minutes. If you're just tuning in live, we'll get started in a little bit. Just giving people some time to find the live feed, check in, and we'll get started. Hey, Allison. See some people. The difference between this and the live workouts. During the live workouts, I can't see the comments as much because I'm far away from the camera. With this, I can kind of see everything. So if anybody has questions or anything, and I'll talk about it a little bit more when we get started, just type them in the box, and I will answer them or try to get to them at the end of the session. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far. Nice day, starting to open up, sky starting to shine a little bit. Sun's peeking its head out throughout a dreary Monday. But hopefully everybody got a good Monday workout in, whether it was the at home or doing your own thing. Hey, April. There we go. We'll go ahead and get started. Hey, Tatiana. So today, part 3 of today's, I was about to say workout, but the session, Basics of Exercise, part 3. Today we will focus on flexibility. Just a couple of quick things. If you have any questions, comments, or whatever, type them in the comment box, and I will try to answer them as much as I can toward the end of the session. And Allison, I see your question, and I'll get to it at the end. But yeah, if you have any questions or anything, type them as I'm rolling through, and I'll be able to see them, and I will address them as we get to the end of the session. Okay, so flexibility, I always start by defining what we're talking about. So flexibility is a degree of movement that occurs at the joint or range of motion. So that's a fancy way of saying range of motion. At the joints, example, shoulder, we all know them: shoulder, elbow, wrist and ankles, knees, the hips. Those are all example of the joints in the body, okay? ACSM, the American College of Sports Medicine, recommends stretching or flexibility work at least 2 days a week. If you do the OTF workouts, whether we're in the studio or we're doing the at-home Orange Theory workouts, those workouts will help to satisfy the requirements as opposed to the previous 2 workshops. I'm not going to say that Orange Theory or the OTF at-home workouts will satisfy completely the requirements, but it will help to satisfy the flexibility requirements that you have weekly if you do the Orange Theory at-home workouts, or whenever the studios are open, you're doing the Orange Theory workouts at least 2 to 3 days a week. And so again, 2 days a week at least in terms of flexibility is the recommendation for the American College of Sports Medicine. And also, in order to satisfy the body's need, okay, for flexibility training, we recommend adding 2 flexibility sessions, separate sessions, to your weekly routine. So I know I always say in classes in studio that you need more than just the stretching that we do at the end of the workout. You need more warming up, dynamic warm up at the beginning of your workouts if you do them at home. And we'll go through all this throughout this session, okay? So I'll go through the types of stretching that we have and when to do it. There's two that I'll recommend to you and two that I'll mention, which I won't recommend to you, at least that you do on your own, and I'll tell you why. Okay. The first type of stretching is probably the type of stretching that we are all most familiar with, is static stretching. So that involves slow, constant stretch or holding a slow, constant stretch for a period of time. When do you do it? During your cool down. Whenever you get done with the workout, within 5 to 10 minutes after you get done, you're holding static stretches. For example, crossbody static stretch, or the quad stretch, hamstring stretch. That's an example of static stretching. Dynamic stretching or dynamic warming up is activity, okay? Moving a joint through a range of motion in a controlled and functional way. When do you do this? You do this prior to your exercise session, so as a warm-up, and you can include some of it during your cool down. What's an example of that? Well, inside the studio, when we do the 3G workouts, if you start on the weight floor, you will notice movements, okay, that are similar to what you'll be doing for the weight floor block. For example, let's just say like the OTF at home workout, for example, we had a plank, a core block. So a couple of the dynamic warm-up movements that we did mimic the plank position. For example, the wide mountain climber with the reach, you start at the high plank position. Again, it gets your body ready for the movement of the day, especially that core block. We had a sumo squat to stand. We had a lot of legs today, if you did today's at-home workout. So that's an example of dynamic warming up, working through controlled functional movements. And again, those movements should be close to the movements that you're doing throughout your workout, or at the very least, warming up the muscles that will be used primarily during your workout or exercise session. Now, the two movements or the two types of stretching that I won't recommend, but I'll touch upon: ballistic and PNF stretching. So with ballistic, you have a bouncing type of movement at the end of a stretch. An example that I can kind of throw out at you is people who do a dynamic, or if you've seen a dynamic toe reach, where people bounce at the end of the range of motion when they're reaching toward the toes. Why we don't recommend this is you have a decreased chance of injury working that way. So again, that's why we don't recommend ballistic stretching. Also, PNF stretching, it's performed with a partner, but you're working with passive movement and active muscle action. PNF stretching is very effective. However, you need a partner. So that is a partner assistant type of stretch, PNF stretching, and that partner should be trained in PNF. So that should be a certified professional, somebody who knows what they're doing, to help you with PNF stretching. So those are two that I'll just briefly touch upon, but again, don't recommend that type of stretching in your own routine. Static and dynamic is what I'll be focusing on today. So when making, we're making a routine, how do I add flexibility? What do I do? Okay, first of all, as I discussed the previous workshops, or the previous parts of this workshop, I talked about why you should do things, why we do cardiovascular training, why we do resistance training. So I'm going to briefly touch upon why we need flexibility training in our routine, okay? First, it helps to increase your muscle and core body temperature. So when we're getting ready to work out during our warm-up, it helps to increase the body temperature and blood flow to the working muscles. It helps to increase the speed of muscle contraction and relaxation throughout the exercise, increase your rate of force development and reaction time for your workout, increases your strength and power, increases your oxygen delivery to your muscles, okay? And it decreases your chance of injury. That's a big one, team, because that's why we do warm-ups in class, in studio, and the at-home workouts. So the people, whenever we do in-studio sessions or in-studio classes, People who start on the weight floor, they don't go directly to the weight floor. And I'm talking about a normal 2-group class. People don't just go to the weight floor and get started. People warm up on the rowers first. Again, get blood flow going. Get the heart rate up slightly. Get the core temperature up of the body before they head to the weight floor. That's why we do it. All of those benefits and to decrease the chance of injury. That's also why we have the 5-minute rule inside the studio, to where once 5 minutes is gone, you can't come in. It's a safety issue, team. Not only for people waiting on the wait list, but it's a safety issue for you, okay? Coming right in, 5 minutes, the warm-up is over. And without properly warming up, you increase your risk of injury throughout the exercise routine. So that's a big reason why we have that 5-minute rule in terms of in-studio classes, is to decrease the chance of injury. So we don't want you to hurt yourselves. So that's a big reason why we have that 5-minute rule. Okay. Now, what types of stretches you should do? Okay. Just like I went over a few minutes ago. Okay. Static, PNF, ballistic, those 3 types of stretching. Static, again, cross-body stretch, the PNF, the partner-assisted, ballistic. All 3 of those, okay, have been shown before a workout. I'm talking primarily before a workout here. Before a workout, it's been shown to be a little detrimental to your performance, okay, before a workout and as a warm-up. So that's why we do dynamic warming up before we work out. So in terms of developing your own stretching routine, if you're looking for something to do before your run, before your resistance training, dynamic warming up is the way to go. So if you have a leg routine that you're going to do in terms of resistance training or a run, you want to go through movements like, for example, one of my favorite types of movements is the Cossack squat or alternating lateral lunge. It really opens up the hip flexors. And if you have a leg intensive routine or running, etc., that's a good one to add if you have not already as a dynamic warm-up. But before a workout, warming up, we want to emphasize dynamic warming up versus static PNF or ballistic stretching, because again, those 3 have been shown to be a little detrimental to your performance inside of your workouts. Okay. Now, along with those types of stretches, ones that are specific to your routine, you may want to add general movements. So if I'm going to go through a resistance training session that's focused on legs, for example, I also may want to add general movements like jumping jacks, skipping. If I have a rower available to me, okay? Some of you have a rower, okay? A lot of you people have gotten some rowers and added it to your home gym or workout space. Rowing, just like we do in a normal 2-group class before your resistance training sessions, okay? Rowing is a good way to get the body loose for your resistance training session. It mimics class. And also remember, have those movements that are specific to what you're going to be doing in that exercise routine. Something general to increase the body's core temperature and blood flow, and something specific to your exercise routine is what you want to include in your warm-up. Progression, along with that, you don't want to fatigue yourself. So the intensity should be so that your body is ready for exercise. That is the goal of these warm-ups. Increase body temperature, increase blood flow, mind-muscle connection to what you're going to be working, getting your body ready for exercise, but we don't want to fatigue before our exercise bout. So your intensity should be so that you don't fatigue yourself. So during your warm-up, you're not trying to break any records. Like on a warm-up row before you head to the rower, that's a base pace row. That's a light row, getting your body ready for what you're going to be doing on the weight floor. And again, if you have any questions about what to do or anything that I say as I'm going through this, team, make sure to type them in the comment box and I'll try to address them at the end. When making a routine, there will be different factors that influences people's range of motion or flexibility. I'll go through a few, but the point is, after going through these, team, is that you should work to your specific range of motion. What affects that? Joint structure, age. Okay, the older we get, we tend to get a little bit less flexible. Sex. Women tend to be more flexible than men. Connective tissue, elasticity and plasticity, resistance training, muscle bulk. Okay, the more muscle mass you have, the less flexible that you will tend to be, which is why women tend to be more flexible than men, because women tend to have less muscle mass than men. The more resistance training you do, you tend to be less flexible. Okay, that's why I know some of you probably laugh at me on my range of motion of some of the things, because I have that high resistance training background and that, a lot of muscle bulk relative to the average population. But again, you want to work to your range of motion. Your activity level affects it as well. The more active you are, you will tend to be more flexible than a person who is not as active. So all those factors, team, will affect your range of motion. So the point of that, like I said before, is to work to your range of motion when you're developing and going through your stretching routine. The types of stretching, you want to target the muscles that are being worked in your session. So I'm going to go to my resistance training analogy. Let's just say I'm having an upper body session, resistance training session, that I want to prepare for and cool down afterwards. So for my warm-up, I'll maybe add some general movements like jumping jacks, maybe some skipping, butt kicks, something to get my heart rate up, get blood flow going to the entire body to increase my core body temperature. But I'll maybe add some dynamic movements, arm circles, okay? Working through range of motion, okay? Some dynamic chest stretches. I'll do those types of things before my upper body session because it's specific to that session. I'm working the upper body. In general, let's just say, hey, I'm doing a total body routine. I don't really know what to do or what to open up. In general, you want to target shoulders, hip flexors, and the hamstrings in general, especially if you're doing a total body session. Why those three? Think about it. Those are the three anchor points that we focus on inside the studio and at the at-home workouts. Whenever you hear me talk about set position, shoulders, trunk, hips, okay? Those areas, team, those three anchors we focus on throughout our workouts, especially with Orange Theory. So in general, hamstrings, hip flexors, shoulders, that'll be a good place to start in terms of what types of stretches to include in your routine. Frequency, at least twice a week. So research has shown that your gains, your short-term gains from stretching, and by that I mean increases in your range of motion, start to decrease after 24 hours. So that's why it's important to include at least 2 days a week of stretching in your exercise routine. Again, if you're doing the Orange Theory at home workouts, those workouts include dynamic warm-up and cool down, and that will help to satisfy your weekly requirements. Duration, you hold each stretch, if it's a static stretch, holding each stretch for 15 to 30 seconds. Typically, when we do the Orange Theory at home workouts, and you see the stretches inside the studio, that's why we hold them for 20 seconds. So static stretches, you want to hold each stretch for about 15 to 30 seconds. You can also include multiple sets, just like a resistance training routine. So for example, if I'm doing a total body stretching routine, I can go through top to bottom, shoulders, trunk, core, legs, however I want to do it. I can hold each stretch for 15 to 30 seconds, and then I can run back through that series of stretches again if I'm developing my own routine. If you're doing dynamic warm-up, How long do you do a dynamic warm-up activity for? At least 30 seconds. So if you notice during the at-home workouts, all of our dynamic movements will tend to be at least 30 seconds. If we're doing both sides, it will tend to be 30 seconds each side. Or if we're doing one general dynamic movement like a jumping jack, we're doing that for probably around a minute. So dynamic warm-up drills, 30 seconds each side, or if it's something that's a general movement like a squat, jumping jack, etc., or a movement that you're alternating sides within it, 1 minute. Intensity, where do you want to go to? You want to go to the point of mild discomfort. You'll hear me say that a lot during the videos. Mild discomfort, not pain. Okay, so you shouldn't hurt yourself. You should get to the point where you stretch. All right, I feel it. It's slightly uncomfortable, but I'm not hurting myself. Mild discomfort. Okay. At the very least, and I'll talk about this in a second, if you're doing a standalone routine, you want to move around a little bit before you stretch, but I'll get to that a little bit more in a second. When to stretch, timing. Again, your dynamic routine should be a warm-up before your exercise session. Your static stretching should be within 5 to 10 minutes post-workout. Okay? If you're doing a separate session, so a separate stretching routine outside of your workouts, these separate sessions are good for recovery. For some people, it's a good way to relax. Myself, personally, I like to do a couple days out of the week in the evening time, a separate stretching session. It helps to relax me. A lot of times I'm pretty sore from the day's workouts. So at the end of the day, probably within a half hour, 45 minutes before I head to bed, 2 or 3 days out of the week, I like to do a separate stretching session before I turn in for the night. And it's good if I'm going to do that, or if you're going to do that, is to do some light movement before you start. And to explain that, I have some rubber bands here. I'm an exercise physiology major, and a lot of my professors, whenever we talked about flexibility, they brought out a rubber band to use as an analogy. So think of the body, think of stretching like a rubber band, okay? The more I stretch this rubber band and the more I continue to stretch it over time, this rubber band will start to loosen up. So if I were to do the stretching, working it, so pretend I'm stretching, pretend this is the muscles of the body. I do this to this same rubber band over days, weeks, months, okay? The position that it's in at rest, if you can see it here, will start to lengthen over time. Body works the same way. The more you stretch, the more you'll increase your range of motion like a rubber band. Now, also like a rubber band, why we emphasize static stretching after your exercise session and not before your exercise session, not before you increase your body's core temperature, increase blood flow. Imagine if I put this same rubber band in the freezer. It's cold. I put this rubber band in the freezer. After an hour, I take it out, and then I try to stretch it. What's going to happen to that rubber band? It's going to snap. Think of the body the same way, okay? If you're not properly warmed up before static stretching in particular, you increase your chance of injury, team. Again, the rubber band snapping. Also, that may decrease your performance within that upcoming workout session. So again, before a workout, it's more beneficial to use dynamic type of stretching as your warm up. Static stretching, where we hold stretches at the end of your exercise session, and after, at the very least, you got some blood flow going and your body's temperature is raised a little bit. So if I want a standalone session, so let's just say I'm not working out, but you got some time, 20, 30, 20 minutes. Stretching doesn't take that long. A 10 to 15 minute session will do the trick. Let's just say you want to do a standalone session. What I like to do before I stretch at home, I like to walk around a little bit, do some stuff, maybe do some dishes, clean up a little bit, walk around, okay? Do some light movement, maybe some squats, maybe some Cossack squats. Some of the routines that I do will have dynamic movement first, and then I will get into the static stretching. That point, again, increasing your blood flow a little bit, increasing your body's temperature a little bit, so you get the most out of the static stretching and the rubber bands, and that the rubber band doesn't snap when your body's cold. So I would recommend, team, if you're gonna do a standalone static stretching routine, get some light movement, maybe a couple of light dynamic warm-up exercises before diving into a standalone static stretching routine. But that is important. And again, we recommend that along with your stretching or dynamic warm-ups before your workouts and static stretching after your workouts, trying to throw in 2 or so standalone stretching sessions outside of your workouts, okay? That is all I have in terms of what I had prepared for you guys. So if you had any questions, throw them out at me. One question that I saw Allison had at the top was any stretching routines that I have. There is a multitude of YouTube videos that has a lot of stretching routines. In terms of an app that I can recommend to you, and currently I think that app is free. Currently, don't call me on that, but the Nike Training Club app that you can download, and I think it's currently free. Typically there's a monthly charge, and I'm not trying to push it, this is just giving you an example of what I use. That app has a lot of stretching routines that you can do. Some that target specifically runner flexibility, or running warm up. Some are yoga, stretching, working through range of motions routines. And a lot of places like Adidas has one. There's a multitude of apps that have videos that you can follow in terms of stretching routine. But off the top of my head that I can think of, you can search YouTube easily. But I know the Nike Training Club app is a pretty good one. I use that one myself. And I got the Nike symbol here. I use the Nike Training Club app myself in terms of stretching routines that I can follow along with. If you have any questions in terms of what specific stretches, in terms of how to target the shoulders, how to target the chest, quads, hamstrings, you can type those and I will shoot it out at you. I also, team, 1 or 2 weeks ago, I did Trainer Tip Tuesday. I think it was not last week's, but the week before's Trainer Tip Tuesday video that I put on our YouTube channel. I did hit a couple of stretches going from top to bottom, full body. So I refer you also to the Trainer Tip Tuesday from 2 weeks ago. The theme was recovery and flexibility. I did go through several stretches hitting the full body. So you can go to our YouTube channel, OTF Williamsburg, take a look at that video, and I did have some stretches for the full body in that video. So let's see here. Let's see if I, looking through the comments, I see a lot of hey coaches. Hey everybody. Um, I'll hang out for a couple more minutes. If you don't have any questions, thank you for joining me. Also, if you do have questions that you think of after this is over, you could still post them on the YouTube page. I recommend if you have questions later, this will be going up on our YouTube channel within the hour. I recommend if you have any questions that you think of afterwards, if it's not immediately afterwards, like within the next hour, I recommend posting that question on the YouTube video because I will see that alert first. That alert will stick out to me. I get a lot of Facebook alerts. So after a while, the Facebook alerts and comments will start to get buried. So if you have a question later on, go find this video on our YouTube channel and post it there because I'll get a separate standalone YouTube alert. I don't get a lot of YouTube alerts. So when that comes through, that really gets my attention. Again, the Facebook alerts will tend to get pushed down and down. They can get lost after a while. So hopefully, team, hopefully this will help to, if you have questions about how to include stretching in your routine, hopefully this workshop helped to answer those questions. And you're welcome, Allison. This will be posted, like I said, on the YouTube channel within the hour. Part 4, the fourth and final part, will be tomorrow, and the focus will be neuromuscular training. That's a fancy way of staying balanced. That will be part 4, the fourth and final part of the basics of exercise. Thanks a lot for watching. Again, if you have any questions, post them ideally on the YouTube page because I'll see those comments a lot faster. Have a good night, team. Hopefully this helped you out.